Hello everyone, this is Valerie with 3B Silk Design. I'm going to be doing a silk shibori scarf, and this is the basic white scarf. It's 72 inches long by 14 inches wide. Right now I'm just going to paint the base coat, and it doesn't have to go on in any particular way. I'm just trying to get the base color in. If you notice the way when you put the dye down, how it just spreads through the silk. And the color's really pretty, really vibrant. This is turquoise. One of my favorites, as anyone who's seen my scarves will know, because like 80% of them have turquoise in them. Again, not trying to get this in any particular pattern at the moment. Doesn't even have to be neat. I'm just dyeing the scarf with a base color. Because I will be wrapping it, which I'll show you in a later step, and then over dyeing it, and then I'm going to over dye it a third time. So initially when the dye hits, it spreads, and the longer it sits uncontained, the more it'll spread. And by uncontained, I mean when I do silk paintings, I use a resist to contain the dye, but this is a different process than that. Painting it this way, I might get some ridges of color. It won't be a perfectly uniform color, but that's okay. It's actually good in this process. I don't know if you can see, but it might be a little bit mottled. I don't know if you can see that. I lucked out because my dye just was finished, and I finished the scarf at the same time. And I'm going to leave it kind of bunched up, and it will probably give me wrinkles and creases in the dye as it kind of settles around and dries. Make it into a nice little puddle. I have the dyed scarf. It's dry. I have my PVC pipe that I use quite a bit, as you can see. String is dyed blue from its multiple uses. So at the top here, I'm going to wrap this open. Oftentimes when I'm doing a shibori, I will fold the scarf multiple times to wrap it. I think this time I'm going to leave it open, which makes it more challenging to wrap and to keep on the pole even. So I secure it just the very corner with rubber bands, and I try to make sure to just get the very corner, because if you don't get that neatly, it won't look good. You know, it'll be dyed strange in the final product if you don't get that in there just kind of right at the corner. And I'm going to wrap it around, and I'm going to take the scarf. Sorry, I'm pulling out of frame there. And I'm going to wrap it around. This is much more challenging than when it's folded, because what you don't want to do is get it kind of crinkled on top of itself. And even though the end result is very organic, what happens if it's crinkled on top of itself, you're going to get splotches at that point. This is going to be challenging because it wants to crinkle right there. And roll it. Try to get it uniform and tight without a lot of air pockets. And I normally do this on my ironing board, not on the table. And then I take a few minutes and untangle my rope, which is always tangled. You don't want to start with it tangled because as you're wrapping, you're going to hit a snag and it's going to be hard to deal with. Not impossible, and it happens almost every time, but it'll be hard. Makes it harder. So do yourself a favor and kind of make sure you have nice free rope. Okay, so I've started winding and I'm gonna keep going. I'm keeping really firm pressure on the silk. I'm winding down. Winding the silk around. Keeping about a 1/2 inch space, maybe a 3/4 inch space. I want kind of a wide space because I'm going to be over dyeing this twice, which is not something I've tried before, but my thinking is the second dye will hit this dye and push it down, and then the third dye will hit the second dye and push it down and create multiple kind of layers of color. That's my thinking. To make that really happen though, you have to have this nice and tight because you're trying to preserve this blue. And what does that is the pressure of the rope not allowing the dye to settle down into the silk, keeping it like a resist in the painting would. You know, when I paint the scarves, there's a resist. Well, this is kind of acting as a resist, and keeping the dye that I'm going to apply over it from over dyeing this color. Keeping nice firm pressure on the rope. Got it wrapped through my fingers. It's a little hard on the hands, but it's worth it. And if you'll notice, I've got my silk pretty much all wrapped here now. It's wrapped itself. As I've been wrapping, it's been wrapping around. Keeping that kind of 3/4 inch spacing. To me, this is the hardest way to do it, is when the scarf is open. It's not folded at all. And it was funny because it was the very first one I did, which came out really well. I did this way, so obviously I tried to do it the hardest way first, because why not? Good news is, once you do it the hardest way, everything else seems easier. And if you don't know it's the hardest way, you just don't have that in your head and it doesn't become a barrier, which is a key to life. Putting the tape on and making sure it's making good contact with the silk with at least 2 bands of rope. I keep some degree of pressure on it just in case the tape isn't holding it enough. I pull it up and I push it down. I pull it back a little because I gotta get that tape off. Oops, I didn't push it down far enough. There we go. See, I want all of that. Optimally, I want the rope sitting on top of itself. See, like here, how it's sitting on top of itself? So I try to push the silk down as far as I can to get that rope sitting on top of itself as much as possible. The tighter it is, and the more it's doing that, the better it's going to preserve this. And it pulls it out a little bit. So I'm going to unwrap just a tad and keeping pressure on it. Pulling it back, straightening it out, and coming back and trying to not have that be folded. And I'm gonna grab the silk again. That's firm pressure on my rope. I'm pulling hard, and I wind again. Where I catch that silk, try to make sure it's laying down as flat as I can get it. At this point, the silk's kind of made its own path. It's gonna do what it's gonna do. Because it's now wrapped around and the top part of it's up into this. So it's kind of when you start to know if you've got a good wrap or not, because at this point, there's not much you can fix about it. So try to just keep it going, and if it's laying down and it's not folding over itself. And when I finish wrapping this, I can do the second coat of dye, but then I have to wait until it's dry, reasonably dry, to put the next coat on. You don't have to, you can put the next coat right on, but I find it moves around better if it's dry in between. Then I have to wait for it to totally dry to steam it. And then if I want to load pleats, I need to let it dry again, and that doesn't sound bad because silk dries really fast, except for when it is rolled onto a pole and scrunched down. It can take a week sometimes. This is a very big area to scrunch down, so I'm being kind of optimistic here. I unfortunately just slipped a little bit and let the pressure off the rope. I tried to put it back on, and I'm going to stop right there. Because I can't have the masking tape on the pole when I scrunch it, because it won't scrunch. Okay, so I've got the wrapped pole. I've got a fair amount of royal blue dye, Jacquard royal blue mixed with about half and half dye and water. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start the water. I'm doing this over a sink because there'll be a lot of dye that dumps down, and I've got my gloves on because it's very messy in my old junky clothes. So I take cool water, and I'm going to wet the scarf. And you will see a good amount of dye is going to come rolling off. Okay. And what that does is it causes the blue dye to not wick the turquoise dye, to not wick the royal blue dye so much. Because what you want, again, is that turquoise dye to remain turquoise underneath where the rope is. I mean, it'll wick through the material quickly if it's dry. I'm kind of being conservative here and doing it with a sponge. Normally I would just dump it on, which I'll probably do a little bit towards the end. Not too much technique to this, you just put it on. As you can see, it's still dripping turquoise dye into the sink, or maybe you can't see, but now it's also dripping the royal blue dye. And I kind of chose these colors specifically because where I'm using a 3-dye process, the royal blue will move the turquoise dye around pretty well. And the green dye that I'm going to use for the 3rd stage will really move the royal blue dye around. It kind of pushes it around. Look how pretty that is, the turquoise with the royal blue. Now this is the part that's interesting because it's folded. It all looks royal blue. I mean, you don't really at this point have any idea what's going on under there, whether it's preserving the turquoise or not, which is what makes it so much fun too, because when you unwrap it, you never know what to expect. I've done scarves where I unwrap it and the color has all blended together. It didn't preserve any of it because I didn't wrap it tight enough. And I've had others that have come out beautifully with nice kind of clear distinction between the colors. Okay, so I am going to just let that drip into the sink for a little bit, and then when I think it's done dripping, I will take it into the house where I'm in the garage right at the moment. I'll take it into the house where it can dry in the air conditioner because it'll dry faster. Now I'm adding green. I don't know if you can see how bright that green is. Here I'm just continuing to paint the green dye on until the scarf is fully covered and the silk is pretty saturated. As you can see, a lot of the green is dripping off. I can see the teal, the turquoise blue running out. I don't really see the royal blue, but usually the green will move the royal blue around pretty significantly. But like all experiments, we don't know until we see the final product. And even if it doesn't do what I wanted to do, I'll learn something from it each time. And if it doesn't come out, I take the scarves that don't turn out the way I want them to, and I make silk flowers out of them. So, because there's always some part of it that's pretty, and when you make the flowers, you can choose those parts and discard the parts that didn't come out so pretty or didn't work out. So anyway, so now I do need to let it dry and dry completely, and then I will steam it, which will be the next step. It is quite wet at the moment. I don't know if you can see the dye dripping out of it. And it takes, because it is folded and there's moisture down in it, it takes quite a while to dry. So I'm going to let it drip for a little bit. Once the scarf is painted and dry, I steam set the dye. So now comes the moment of truth. We're going to unwrap the scarf and see what happened. I don't know if you can see, but it's green and blue, dark blue, light blue, because the silk can only absorb so much dye. So where it's saturated, it doesn't continue to accept dye. It will look like it will until you actually wash it, and then that extra dye just rinses right out. And when you rinse it, a lot of dye rinses out. And like all tape, you got to find the end. If you can see, the dye has mostly come out of the ribbon because it's not a natural fiber and it won't accept the dye. It does get a hint of color because I've used it many, many times. Now I'm going to take the rope off. I take the 2 rubber bands off the bottom and I stick my arm into the PVC pipe and start pulling the rope out. The scarf will stay in the same basic shape until I pull it up and I can see the colors. Finally, my favorite part. The rope is all off and I'm going to start unwinding the scarf from the PVC pipe. The colors look good. I can see the green, I can see the royal blue, and I can see the turquoise. The pattern is pretty, and the ridges seem pretty random, actually. So here you can see the finished colors. You can see the turquoise is sitting up on the top of the ridges where the rope was, and the green is settled down into the valleys with the royal blue kind of lining the edge of the turquoise. It's a pretty good representation right here. You see the turquoise on the top and how it creates the pattern.